again. No, don't press this one, just press this one.
The Indian elephant is robust, but not well enforced, and even though the Indian elephant was made the National Heritage Animal in 2010. So what I want to do, these are obviously, you can see, these are truly interdisciplinary concerns as well as public concerns, and what I want to do is to understand the way that the elephant has been understood culturally in India, and suggesting that although the figures may seem poor, that the elephant in India has actually done better than it has done in many other Asian countries because of its important and unique cultural role. And I also hope that here, as we begin to know more about the animal, it will help the animal weather the ongoing crises precipitated by human populations. So my project here, I hope, brings two new things to the studies of the elephant. There are many studies going on. In fact, I'm working with people at the Tata Institute of Sciences and with people in wildlife conservation charities. And what I'd like to do is bring together my work from Indian cultural studies to this, and the other is to make it the first study of an Indian animal from the growing body of work in the humanities on animal studies, which has largely been to do with farming or domestic animals in the West. So this is very different from the existing approaches, environment, biology and so on, by scientists, historians, activists and enthusiasts, who've all really been very supportive in helping me start to get this project off the ground. So what do I want to do here? Well, what I want to do is I want to look at the ways Indians think about elephants and what are the borders between the categories of animals, humans and gods, and how porous are these boundaries. So I'm going to look at a range of published works, archival resources, visual culture, interviews with elephant handlers and wildlife experts to try to begin to write this cultural history of the Indian elephant. So, I've told you the elephant has got a very posh Latin name, Elephas maximus indicus, but in Sanskrit has many more. Ipa, Gaja, Hastin, Karin, Matanga, Naga, Varana, Kanjara, Padmin, Dwipa, Dantin, Sindara, just a handful of names. And as you all know from popular mythology, the more names something has, like words for snow in Inuit languages, the more important it is. And so little has been said, though, about the elephant's role in cinema. And this goes back 100 years. I'm sure all of you know that next year is the centenary of the first Indian film, Raja Harishchandra. And although I don't think we have any evidence of elephants in that, we certainly have some early clips of elephants here. So I'm interested today in looking at how the elephant's cinematic image develops from earlier representations of elephants in India to create a new way of looking at the elephant, and how this very important form of media could be important to the elephant's welfare as well as our understandings of it. So elephants found originally in India images of elephants in the Indus Valley civilization, and importantly for our purposes on Mauryan imperial insignia from the coins of Chandragupta Maurya in the 3rd century BC to the Ashokan pillars, whether topping pillars such as the pillar at Sankissa, or in carvings on the Sarnath pillar, whose lines form the national emblem of the modern republic, or on the rock edict at Dhauli, the battle after which Ashoka declared this was an end to war. And the great conversion to Buddhism. It's very interesting that many of our early images of elephants do indeed come from Buddhist traditions, but they're hugely important. But we also see elephants supporting the great temples at Ellora, on Arjuna's penance, at Mahabalipuram from the 7th or 8th century. Statues there as well as carvings that you will have seen if you've been there. And although they were hidden for the election, we of course have Mayavati's elephants filling the Ambedkar Park in Noida. Folk images of elephants decorate buildings, used as block prints on fabric, miniature paintings featuring hunts and processional elephants, while in Shatranj, the Indian form of chess, the bishop is Ulfil, or the elephant. Sadly, I believe here, made out of a product we won't be talking about today. But elephants feature, as well as in these material representations, in Indian mythology. We have the story of the emergence of Indra's white elephant from the churning of the Milky Ocean, alongside the other big pillars or supporters of the world. We see, the association of water we have. Elephants seem to live on many levels. They live in water, in Gajalakshmi, where the goddess of wealth is illustrated by elephants, and in other myths, including my favourite. Elephants used to fly until they came across the irate sage Dirgapadas, who was trying to sleep, and the elephant sat on the branches of the tree and broke them and landed on him, so he cut off their wings and condemned them to stay on the earth. Jain and Buddhist stories of elephants abound, and the Buddha himself is often represented by an elephant, especially in early art. And Ganesh, the elephant-headed god who has the body of a child, though I don't know if you noticed in the processions this year, increasingly that of a full-grown man, is one of India's most popular gods. Vignesha, the remover of obstacles, invoked at the beginning of any work or task. But elephants feature not just in art, but are themselves art objects. They're wearers of ornaments and caparisons. This is at Leeds, at the Royal Armouries in Leeds. I never thought I'd get interested in armour, but there you go. Caparisoning for ceremonies, jewellery. They wear necklaces, anklets, trunk ornaments, and have functional objects also around them. Howdahs, ankushes and other regalia, and of course we've mentioned that ivory and other trinkets. Incidentally, this is thought to have been, this is a Mughal suit of armour for an elephant captured at the Battle of Plassey. So really something very fascinating historically. Elephants were very important in early India as one of the 4 divisions of the army from the earliest days, at least as early as the Mauryas. Famed in the classical world after King Porus's elephants fought against Alexander the Great, but they were also used as draft animals and indeed as executioners. These war elephants shaped Indian architecture as forts had to incorporate elephant gates, Gajadwaras, openings large enough to let an elephant through, and have spikes to thwart them, and inside the forts were the pilkhanas, the elephant stables, which had to house the thousands of elephants, and I mean thousands, kept by the Mughal emperors. Akbar the Great was a connoisseur of elephants and had more than 1,000 in his stables, and numerous miniature paintings show him alongside his precious elephants. This is one of the most famous, his taming of his favourite elephant, Hawaii, the rocket, which was celebrated.
यहाँ सांगानेर में आपका स्वागत है राजा। चंद्रभान जी का पैगाम मिलते ही हमने आलम पनाह को खबर कर दी थी। आलम पनाह यहाँ हाथियों के अखाड़े में आपका इंतजार कर रहे हैं। आलम पनाह कहाँ है? आलम पनाह वो रहे। ऐसे बिगड़े हाथियों और बिगड़ते घोड़ों को काबू में करके उन पर सवारी करना हमारे आलम पनाह का शौक है।
I would like to assure you that no elephants were hurt in the making of this film, which was actually made with vets on at hand and so on, but very much recreating this Akbar's image of heroism in the film is definitely to do with this elephant, and I feel a little sorry for this poor bewildered circus elephant who must have wondered what on earth was going on. But very much part of the Mughal law. I mean, my favourite story is that of Firuz Shah Tughlaq, who famously went to Orissa and on his way back got lost in the jungle for 3 months with his elephant, and they had to send a search party from Delhi to pick him up. So elephants can be quite dangerous like this. But elephants are not just in these images, they populate Indian literature, their characters in the animal fables, the Hitopadesha, the Panchatantra, although interestingly they don't have the characteristics for which we prize elephants today. Instead the elephant seems to be a rather foolish animal and is easily outwitted by the cunning jackal. MF Hussain's famous Gajjagamani, Madhuri Dixit, with her walk. In fact, MF Hussain is very fond of elephants, which again he shows frequently in his paintings, and I even have a nice picture of him with Lalu. You know, all these people like Mayavati and Jayalalitha give the temple elephants of Tamil Nadu a month's holiday every year to recover from their arduous ordeal. So, you know, we're often in quite strange company here with our elephants. And of course, in many poems, we have Kalidasa's epic, the Meghaduta, that clouds are compared to elephants, bending down over mountains, Amya Kushro. If you know Simon Digby's work, War, an Elephant, of course, he talks about it there. And elephants always add to the landscape in Kalidasa's Raghuvamsha, or in Tamil classical or Sankam poetry, folk tales, and famously in erotic literature, which you'll have to go and look up yourself. Women are compared to elephants in different forms in the Anangaranga. Though I'm not going to talk about it today, I just couldn't resist putting in a clip of one of Kipling's Just So stories. Here, how the elephant's child, or as we normally call it, how the elephant got his trunk. And we'll come back more to Kipling through films later on. Now, one of the things that's fascinating in India is, of course, a scientific body of literature. You've all heard of the Shastras, the Artha Shastra, the Dharma Shastra, but did you know there's a Gajja Shastra as well as Shastra, scientific works on how to look after elephants. And this has been composed in Sanskrit over several centuries. It builds on the work of the Artha Shastra, which also talks about how to deal with the king's elephants. And there are medical treatments. There's a Hasti Ayurveda for medical care, and a lovely work produced in Assam in the 18th century, the Hasta Vidyanava, the ocean of knowledge about elephants, as well as the Matanga Leela, which Egerton translated into English. Now, these Gajja Shastras are fascinating because they seem to be composed from very hands-on knowledge with mahouts used by the British in their forestry work, capturing, training and maintaining elephants, and still in use today about categories and aesthetics of India. And if you're a fanatic like I am, you'll be a member of several Kerala elephant sites where we have Elephant of the Month, particularly chosen for his posture, his head, the way he holds his head, the noise he makes when he's flapping his ears and so on. So I don't know the elephants well enough to vote for them, but I certainly enjoy watching them. So I'm just giving you a feeling that the elephants are everywhere in Indian culture, and so what are we doing with them in cinema? And how much is this background part of what happens to us in cinema? And I'm not obviously going to give you an encyclopedic tour of every elephant that's seen in every Indian film, but give you quite a wide selection of instances. I'm also going to show you the film which I think probably started this obsession with me, which is Alexander Korda's Elephant Boy. Have many of you seen this film? Well, you've seen it many times, of course, because curiosity always playing at home. But it's a fascinating film. Robert Flaherty is one of the directors who you might know through his work in Nanook of the North. One of the early makers of wildlife films. And he went to shoot wildlife footage in India, and Alexander Korda, the famous Hungarian migrant, bit of a rogue, comes to London, gets Winston Churchill on his books as a script writer, and launches the first Indian international star of this film, Sabu, because they decided that the film couldn't just be about wildlife. Nobody paid to see that, so they needed a story. So first of all, they tried to do a story about a white elephant, So they whitewashed an elephant, and the elephant didn't like it, kept washing it off and throwing dust on it. That didn't work. So they decided they'd take Kipling's story, Tumai, of the elephants here. And this is a magnificent tusker. He was called Idramat, who plays Kalanag, was actually rather a rogue character. He was from the King of Mysore's elephant stables and was an opium addict. Doesn't play a character as such. He's not a talking elephant or an active elephant, but he's a companion of an orphaned boy here. And I'm just going to let a bit of this show in the background, because you see this mixture of wildlife and of the elephant here of the story. Given the boy, through his mastery of the elephant, acquires status and respect in British and in Indian society. It's also a curious film. There are no women in this film, not even the elephants are female. And Sabu, who was the son of a Mahmoud, working in the stables in Mysore, was launched from this, goes on to become an American war hero, and the rest is history. But interestingly, it was shown at the Venice Film Festival the same year as the Marathi devotional film, Santa Tukaram. So we have two very different depictions of India going on here. One, the Indian depiction of saintly behaviour, evoking Gandhi. On the other hand, this world of animals, the wildlife, the exotic, and of course the British Forestry Department. This film was soon followed in 1941 by Dumbo, one of Disney's great films, a modern animal fable, showing, of course, how difference can be an advantage, as the huge ears which bring around the separation of baby and mother and the cruel treatment of the baby actually lead to his success and raise status. And it's really with Dumbo, I think, we start seeing in Western film, which of course impacts on Indian film very much, as I'll be showing you in a moment. This idea of the elephant is cute, emotional, thinking, and although mute, communicates very much with the body. I also think the fact that the elephant song "Baby Mine" won the Oscar perhaps had some influence. I don't know, but it gives a certain body there, perhaps. But we don't know really what impact these had directly on Indian cinema. We do know in Indian cinema that animals have appeared, many other animals have appeared over the years. I'm sure you all have your favourite. Dwyer and Sholay, I think, have to be a contender. Pigeons that carry messages and have flashbacks in Menepyakia. Taffy the dog who can act on Krishna's instructions in Hamake Heko, and a whole host of others. These animals follow language, act consciously, take directions from the divine, but the elephant, I believe, has a particular role in bringing its previous symbolic meanings to the film, as well as starring in the film to such an extent it can even eclipse the human star. Now, elephants are often shown in early Indian films to show the high, usually royal status of characters because they're associated with power and authority as well as wealth. And for this film, which Eleanor is working on as part of her PhD work, The Light of Asia, 1925, the elephants here convey the status of Gautam Buddha's family, and the king of Jaipur lent his elephants to this rather strange team of Bengalis and Germans who came to make a film that was shown to the royal family at Windsor. We also have elephants, of course, to do with Mughals, Mahmud Khan's great Humayun here, and the clip I showed you at greater length from Jodha Akbar. Superstar Rajnikant has a pet elephant in the film Muthu. Has anybody seen Muthu? No Rajni fan? Oh, good, I'm glad there's one Rajni fan in the room. I'm not quite sure what the elephant is doing in the film, apart from, I think, just to add status here. But of course, religious genres. So here we have a holy song. Some of you might have seen this film as children, Safed Hathi, the white elephant by Pawan Singh, who appears to help a boy who has a very difficult life. It's a kind of typical folklore motif of this magical animal that lives in the forest to help the others. And in more recent years, I don't know if any of you saw this, the one was shown at the London Film Festival, the white elephant again, an elephant who chooses who he lives with from year to year and chooses to live with the village drunk. and how the elephant transforms him and his life in another wonderful fable here. We also have elephants making fleeting appearances in the home. I'll play with the that one there. And again, this idea of, the ludicrousness of the tramp, the circus travelling elephant, and his mobility we have after a whole sequence of possibilities of the migrant to the city, to Bombay, imitating the royal procession here, I think is quite striking. And a number of elephants appear in these films during the 1950s, taking on these different roles. And I rather like this migration of the forest creature to the city as a symbol of more of these people. And this, we just have the elephant fading into this idea of the city of Bombay and the traffic contrasting the two here. Raj Kapoor had an elephant, Dave Arlen has an elephant too. For those of you who've seen Muninji, and again we're here with this idea of the moral elephant, the elephant's taking on Pran, the arch baddie here of Hindi film. But although I just want to show you this elephant, because again this is the idea of the communication between humans and elephants, I want to get on, of course, to the showpiece film in just a couple of minutes. See if the sound is going to work. That's going to be a real nuisance if I'm going to lose sound. Okay, well anyway. So the film which elephants starred, eclipsing even the major star Rajesh Khanna, who of course we sadly lost earlier this year, is Party Merasati, the film which really is the one that most people think of when we think of the film to deal with the elephant. 1971, an early Salim Javed film, one with rather their fine dialogues, which of course they take on later to their major hits Sholay and Diva. In fact, they wrote the story, I'm sorry, they didn't actually write the dialogues for this, that was Indiraj Anand. Biggest box office hit of its year, and at the time it came out in 1971, the biggest hit in Indian film history. Massively popular, the film lives on today, the name of a campaign to raise awareness of elephants, and the film's title song is probably what's best remembered, breaking records, boom boom, for HMV. The first Indian record to win a silver disc, special awards from the Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals and so on. It was a film which really broke all records, as it were. And let me tell you a little bit more about this film. There were several films made after it. I don't know if you've seen Ma with Dharmendra, who has to reunite a baby elephant. He separates from its mother and they go and play in a nightclub and so on together. It's burning trains, collapsing bridges and so on. Very dramatic film. So this film, Party Merasati, what's so interesting about this? Well, the film story is as follows. A young boy, Raju, is thrown from his father's car in an accident. The father prays to Ganesh, who sends 4 elephants, Ramu, Damu, Mahesh and Ganesh, to look after him and take him home. When his father succumbs to his injuries, the elephants become Raju's family, helped by a loyal retainer. Raju's real family and family servants swindle him out of his considerable inheritance, and he's forced to take to the street, abandoning hope of marrying Tanu, whose wealthy father would approve only of a wealthy man. The elephants and he look after one another, becoming street performers. I'm going to skip that one until I get my sound back. They start a zoo, Pyar Ki Duniya, the world of love. Tanu and Raju marry and have a son, but after finding she can't have another child, Tanu, in the worst case of postnatal depression in Hindi film history, you choose, your elephant or your son? Raju wisely chooses the elephant. Though he beats the elephant for allegedly attacking his son, but Ramu breaks one night into Tanu's house to protect the boy from a snake. But Raju's competitors try to shoot him, and Raju takes the bullet. Raju's a very modern elephant. He answers the telephone here. You'll see him helping Rajesh Khanna answering the telephone. But when he dies here at the end, Tanu realises her mistake. I'm sorry, I can't get this any louder. So the elephants in this Pyar Ki Dunya, the animals are all innocent. They're not killers, even though they're wild cats. So they're called to come and pay their respects to the dead body of their friend. And notice the black chador being put on the elephant. This respect for the elephant is seen today when elephants are killed by trains. The villagers will come and put flowers on them and say prayers to them. So here, no, this is horribly traumatic for children, but it's... My friend who came to Med, children took this to show in New York, and he had a letter from the principal saying, please don't let any more of these films come to our set. Our children, obviously teen children, must be a bit more intense. Now this bit I like, the elephant. What religion is the elephant? Is he a Hindu? Is he a Muslim? Or he could even be a Christian. And I think this is also part of this whole sort of sacredness of the elephant that becomes very clear to us in the film here. Now, Raju was played by Rajesh Khanna, who's the biggest star of the time in Hindi film. And Tanu is Tanuja from the Samart dynasty, her daughter's Kajal. But they were eclipsed, I believe, by the four pachyderms, in particular by Ramu, who has a major role with the others in support. And here, this reconciliation, you see it taking under the look of the elephants, their eyes granting permission to the family to carry on. We have the statue of Ramu set up here. Elephants are female, they certainly look female here, small female, well-trained circus elephants here. Although, of course, bull elephants are more prestigious as captive elephants. In fact, it was an insult in Mughal times to ride on a female elephant. It meant you really weren't important. You had to have a male elephant here. And if you notice, the elephants are all named after gods. Mahesh, Ganesh, and Ramu and Damu, of course, are Rama and Damodara, or Krishna here, perhaps to give them more intimacy, but Ramu and Raju, very similar names here. And when Raju grows up to have his own family, the elephants in the film, of course, are very childlike and don't mate or reproduce. Although elephants follow a similar life cycle to humans, reproduction beginning in their teens, but these elephants are so devoted to Raju, they are more like servants, loyal and faithful. And the film takes up this story of the Jungle Boy, which is familiar to us perhaps mostly from the Jungle Books about Mowgli, who lives with the animals till he has to return to human settlement, the point at which I got up and walked out of the cinema when I was young, or Tarzan, who lives in the jungle. But in Hati Barasati, the story is reversed, which I think is quite interesting. The elephants come to the city rather than the boy staying with them in the jungle. Hati Barasati is about domestication of the wild, bringing humans and animals together, but the opposite way around. The boy doesn't become an animal and learn to live in the jungle, rather the elephants become human. And this is one of these transition points that I mentioned earlier on between them. But his wife, Tanu, the gender difference I think gets to be important, doesn't trust the elephants to be really human and fears them and actually seems quite jealous of them and says they're wild animals, they need to be chained. And it's striking that her distrust begins to emerge after the romantic honeymoon, and the Freudians among you can begin to read this as a fear of her husband's animal nature, or simply a mistrust of her husband's family. So rather than a self-Bartle problem, we have a Bartle-Hardy problem going on in this film. Tanu herself in the film is associated with cars, a symbol of wealth and modernity, and the famous title song where Raju meets Tanu has the elephants towing her car and pushing it to a garage. A car is alright, but an elephant is better any day. She has a huge imported car, she has a car and a driver, and her father has a car. And in fact, Raju's near death at the beginning of the film is in a car crash, and from then on he prefers to travel with his elephants, who also represents this kind of wealth from which he comes. Throughout the film, the animals are better than humans, and the film says the worst animal is a two-legged animal. Tanu's father, Ratanlal, lies to her. People are obsessed with money, apart from one good doctor we meet. The family and the servants are cheats. The wife leaves home after just one slap, but when he beats Rama with a chain, the elephant caresses him with his trunk. The elephants love without expectation of return, and whatever you do to them, they won't stop loving you. The three surviving elephants even forgive Tanu, as does Raju, who has learned to love from the elephants. Their Pyar Ki Dunya is a world of love, and the film has many sequences. We have meals where tigers and lions come meet at the table and so on. Gentle, loving creatures. But the elephants throughout the film are very human. They're moral animals and they're ethical animals by this stage. Raju's welfare is put before their own. They pray to Ganesh for his welfare, as I showed you at the beginning of the film. They seek out a doctor for him when he falls sick. Ramu sacrifices his life knowingly to bring the family back together, even though he remains innocent. He shows the inhumanity of humans and how they must learn from animals to be selfless and forgiving. Raju has learned this because he's been brought up by the elephants, but the others don't even understand this when they've spent time with them. The elephants understand emotion and seem to follow language, although they don't speak. We get numerous close-ups of the elephant, particularly their eyes, so it's as if we can see what they think, and they can communicate with each other and with Raju. And I showed you that clip there at the end. Ramu, of course, who I'm afraid you don't get to meet more, weeps and gets distressed. He sympathises, he smiles, and has a very expressive trunk. However much he's misunderstood by Tanu, abused by people, murdered, attempted murder by feeding him a banana with a needle in, he never gives up his loyalty to humans. Animals bring little of the wild with them, and I think it's quite obvious now from what I'm saying is that they're actually bringing the divine into the human world, perhaps more than the wild. They're closely associated, as I mentioned, with Ganesh, of course. They rescue him under instruction from Ganesh when Raju's father prays to them, worship Ganesh, and at the end, the travels of the corpse around the grave. I mean, it's more of a Muslim funeral in many ways, with the child and the grave at the end, although the statue garlanded and prayed to at the family is much more the Hindu revered or iconic figure. And though Hati Mere Sati is seen to be a children's film in India, I'm not really quite sure why that is, other than it has animals in it, because it doesn't have key actors who are children, which are normal in children's films. This is something quite different. It has adult romance, it takes an adult perspective, but I sometimes wonder whether it's because the animals are starring, or because people actually see the animals as children themselves, that the film is classed as a children's film. Ganesh, of course, himself becomes a film star in many films, and because of his childlike body, I think, is one of the reasons why he is particularly associated with children's films here. We do, of course, have the big Ganpati songs and festivals in the most popular genre of recent years here, where his childlike nature is emphasised. And the children's genre, which I said is very shaky in India, becomes really established with some of these animated films here, perhaps spinning off from the Amachitra type cartoons, but Hindi animations here. Bal Ganesha was very popular, Naughty Ganesha snowboards around Mount Kailash, where his parents, Shiv and Parvati, live and behave like human parents, and this has had a Bal Ganesha too, because it was so popular. My Friend Ganesha is like other devotional films, another genre of Hindi cinema, where Ganesha is animated, but the humans are not. A young boy whose parents don't have time with him spends time with his maid, and one day when he saves a mouse from drowning, his maid tells him about Ganesha and Mushkaraj, his rat. And the boy wants a friend, so Ganesha appears, brings joy to the boy's life. He persuades his family on the Ganesh festival to bring an idol home and worship it and do the Visarjan. And so very much we end up in a superhero situation, but with the superhero played here by the god and passing on some of his magic to the boy. But again, the intervention of the maid and the vernacular, bringing Ganesha into the modern world. There's My Friend Ganesha 2 and My Friend Ganesha 3 as well, showing these, the popularity of these. So why would film be a different medium for presenting elephants from others? I think here it's partly the star element of the film. You know, the elephants are spectacular animals, and that's important here. But I wonder if also the thing about the films is where the anthropomorphizing of the elephant really begins. The earlier depictions we have in India don't seem to make animals into humans. But when you have animals in a film, how much do you make them human? Like, if you look at the Panchatantra and the Hidyopadesha stories, animals talk, but they're not human. It's just they talk and we don't understand what they're saying, rather than being separate. And you see films like that clip I showed you from Elephant Boy, which I think was quite a powerful image. The boy and the elephant live parallel lives. They're not seen as being particularly different in what they do, the way they get up in the morning, the way they're naughty, have their breakfast, wander around, and so on here. And, you know, other instances, you can think of Rossellini's films, Matrimony with elephants, the forestry department workers. But if the elephant's going to star in a film, he, and it's usually he, has to be anthropomorphized here, like circus elephants they do. So answering the phone, playing football, finding doctors, worshipping, and so on. As well as also working as elephants, they're not being very elephantine in the film. They're behaving like humans. And, I mean, can we understand animals at all without anthropomorphizing them? I mean, even if you watch the great David Attenborough films, you can see the anthropomorphizing of animals when you talk about them. There's a way of understanding them. So is this a human problem in general we have with giving animals any kind of subjectivity here? Tame zoo animals usually have names, and a lot of people who've worked on wildlife with animals have been attacked for verbally for giving the animals names. And it won't be surprising if you find out many of the people that criticise the men and many of the women, like I think of people like Jane Goodall, Cynthia Moss, these famous people are seen as being female, about anthropomorphizing is seen as being a particularly kind of sissy thing to do rather than something good here. Giving human traits to animals, saying they're angry or upset. You know, this, what are we really talking about here? But in recent years, there have been serious studies of the emotional lives of animals here. And this has been part of a wider growth in the study of the emotions in the humanities, along with the side disciplines, psychology, and so on, in the arts. So many people have looked at the study of emotion in literary texts and readings. I'm going to people like Brown and Robinson here. But the study of emotion in film has been vast, because particularly in Hindi film, where we've looked at melodrama as a way of understanding, you know, the emotional excess and why the yelling of Nahi at significant moments here, to a cognitive study of the emotions in film viewing, where emotional involvement is seen as a primary motivating factor in attention and aesthetic response. with animals themselves, the emotional relationship between humans and animals has to be considered, in particular watching animals and watching animals on film. It's very difficult to spend time with an animal and not to anthropomorphise it, as we don't have any other clear way of emotionally bonding with animals. I mean, I'm sure everybody talks about my dog this and my cat that, as if they really do have this emotional life. So it seems sentimental, I think. Most of us, like old ladies say, his kitty wants this or whatever. And yet animals also seem to embody emotions and sentiments to such an extent they become icons of that emotion, greetings cards, advertisements and other media. There's an animal emotion for every suitable occasion, from your birthday to your wedding anniversary. But if it's sentimental or even kitsch, I don't really understand the problem. I mean, philosophers like Solomon have looked at this notion of sweet kitsch here, a display of tender sentiments, not unpleasant, but it's certainly not cool. So if the sentiment brings a greater acknowledgement of animals' presence and creates sympathy for its plight, it seems to me really it's something quite good and positive. So if I show you an image of a cute baby elephant and you decide you're not going to buy ivory after that, then something good has been achieved. But I think really one of the problems with the serious studies of animals here is this association of anthropomorphism not only with sentimentality, with women and with the popular, but also with children. Animals are thought to belong in children's genres of literature and films. Yet, I don't know if many of you read Lever's autobiography of Cheetah, Me Cheetah, which was certainly far from cute. It's totally salacious and unsuitable for children. While in art, Damien Hirst's animals and M.F. Hussein's are not aimed primarily at the young. Novels which grant elephant subjectivity by Gaudi, or characters, Nicholson, or even the Nobel Prize winner Soren Hergo are not seen as childish or kitsch. So I think that's a trap we have to be careful that we don't fall into. We can also think about ways of understanding emotional bonds with animals through the idea of the rasa, the traditional theories of the emotions. And if you see Hathi Meret's Hathi, you go through every one of these emotions with Ramu in relation to him there. He's lovable, he's heroic, he's funny, he's naughty, he's furious, he has pity, terror, all these things he has here, this wonderful loyal creature, ending in Shanta, peace at the end when he dies, his last moment. But is anthropomorphism the only way we can think about boundaries between humans and elephants here? Now this might seem a bit of a silly question because there's obviously a lot of differences between a human and an elephant, but there is a clear closeness here. And does the role of the animal in Indian culture deepen our understanding of what it is to be human, as well as of what it is to be an elephant? Questions of what divide animals from humans have been addressed by many Western philosophers, and I'm thinking of people here like Cavell, Derrida, and Haraway, and so on. And while historians have examined what it is to be human, such as Hawke's popular work recently, writers have explored this in fiction, so Coetzee and his alter ego, Elizabeth Costello, in novels of his such as Disgrace, have raised these questions. While most concur there's a difference between humans and animals, this varies from Derrida's abyssal rupture to a biological continuum. Biological studies continue to blur the boundaries as new findings show the psychology of animals is more complex than hitherto realised. Some animals, they now think, understand the past and the future, while other animals can recognise themselves. But the human-animal divide in India is relatively understudied, apart from I can think of it mostly in a thread running through the work of Wendy Doniger in her studies of animals in Hinduism, where she looks at monkeys, snakes, tigers, cats and herons, but particularly at dogs, horses and cows. Belief in rebirth or samsara has atma or souls born in humans or animals, thus blurring the divisions between them further. And this lack of a clear division forms part of the ethics of non-violence, ahimsa, but the practice of vegetarianism is also part of it. While on the one hand in India you have the great vegetarian, many Hindus still practice Bali or animal sacrifice picturesque, and sources of my favourite expression, aesthetic enthusiasm. They're also children's favourite animals, while adults are always in awe of them. Images of the elephants are also found in countries which don't have elephants throughout the world, and perhaps this is in part to do with their absolute physical difference with humans, their vast size, their distinctive features, and so on. Though recent studies, and I'm thinking of studies by people like Payne, Weller, Christen, Bradshaw, Moss, and so on, have shown the divisions that Derrida suggested between humans and animals may not apply in the case of elephants, that he sees the distinctive characteristics between the species as being speech, and we now know that elephants have these huge complex sound registers. It seems, we don't know if it's a language yet, but there is something there. Reason, they choose where to go, how to migrate. Experience, that they seem to remember. Mourning, some sort of culture. Understanding technology, they use sticks to dig, and so on. In fact, the only undisputed difference between them is that of clothing. We haven't yet found any elephants choosing to wear clothes. But not only are the boundaries between animals and humans unclear, but those between animals, humans, and gods. Gods can take on animal and human forms, so Vishnu's 10 incarnations include an animal. He's a fish and he's a boar, Matsya and Varaha. He's also human and animal at the same time, Narasimha. And he's also, of course, in the perfect human forms of Krishna and Rama. Ganesha embodies human, animal, and divine in one form, a god with a human body and an elephant head, while elephants as animals have a divine or a semi-divine status. And Rama's deification at the end of Hati Merasati is not dissimilar from that of Guruvaya Kesavan, whose statue outside the famous Guruvaya temple is honoured on his death anniversary every year. I don't know, it doesn't seem that clear, but that's a statue on the left, a life-size statue of Guruvaya Kesavan, which the other elephants come to garland on his anniversary. I have a copy of the film, which unfortunately I couldn't transfer today, Guruvaya Kesavan, where the film shows the elephant from his dedication to the temple in a lovely song by Yesudas, to key episodes from his life. And at the end of the film, Kesavan foresees his death, and with the lotus in his trunk, approaches Krishna as Guruvaya Rappan and lays the lotus at his feet. So, going through these various things today, what conclusions could I begin to draw here, and what am I thinking about following up? Well, the Indian elephant is a wild forest animal. That's different from the African elephant, as you know, the savannah animal. Can't speak English anymore. It's a savannah animal who actually creates the savannah. But the Indian elephant is seen mostly these days for conflict with humans, as the ever-growing human population is clearing forest habitat to grow food crops, which of course attract the elephant to an easy food supply. Organisations, including the World Wildlife Fund, the Wildlife Trust of India, Friends of the Asian Elephant, have made progress on the issue of captive elephants in zoos and circuses, but few people seem to know about the Indian elephant's status as an endangered species. Poaching is not the huge problem here, but this loss of its roots really are. This legislation to protect the animal was followed up by the National Elephant Conservation Authority, GUDGA, a consortium of elephant research led by a friend of many of ours, Mahesh Rangarajan, from the Nehru Memorial Library in Delhi. Many plans are afoot to create elephant landscapes, to create bridges over roads and railway tracks, but it's very difficult when we find even today the Indian Tourist Board can't tell the difference between an Indian and an African elephant in its advertisements. The tamed animal and its divine and human representations, from toys to Ganesha to films, which present us with the cute and cuddly, kitschy aesthetic, are nowadays the ways that many of us know the elephants best. If these representations encourage people to respond to the elephant, learn its plight, and encourage us to protect elephants, this must be a good thing. The elephant, once seen as an orientalising symbol of India, is now a way of understanding what it means to be human, animal, and divine. However, it's very deeply worrying that today the elephant itself is disappearing, and Murakami wasn't wrong, and may soon remain visible to us only in art and other representations, such as cinema. Though some of us have been a bit more lucky getting to bathe them. Now, I don't know what to do about my lack of sound, because we cannot go any further. I mean, one of the great moments in Hindi cinema of courtship through elephants.
Do you want to come and sit down?
I don't mind, I can drink some water.
Yeah, you can bring the water here. Yeah. 1 sec. So, well, that was incredibly rich, fascinating talk, Rachel, and what a great start to the year. And I was thinking, I don't know, I think it was that clip of the film which had Jodha Akbar, where Akbar is trying to capture or tame the wild elephant. That sort of triggered a set of questions in my head, and which is, I mean, that the elephant in India occupies a continuum that starts from the wild and ends with the divine, going through the imperial. And what I think it's something, what we don't have, and I'd like to hear a little bit more on that. What we don't have is the kind of combative engagement with the elephant because of its size as a marker of some kind of heroism, or like or masculinity, like the bullfight in Europe. So I was wondering what it might be able to tell us about either configurations of masculinity or femininity, because it is a subject of care, it is a caring subject, but it isn't, its mammoth size does not necessarily make it into an object of that you need to tame and combat. So there's no given heroism associated with it. So I was wondering what that might tell us about.
I think in this film, part of it is because, many of you have seen the film Dwyer Akbar, and I think one of the things that's fascinating about it is obviously this imperial couple is behaving like the Indian middle-class couple. She cooks him a feast, and she has a Krishna temple in the house, and it's all very sort of cosy and not very imperial, really, in the way that it's done. And I think part of it is also reminding us of Akbar's great heroism and prowess, and that he is able to take on this, this very... elephants are very dangerous animals. And to take this on here in combat. But it's also that although Akbar loved going on these chases and capturing an elephant and taming it, that's not the usual way that elephant hunts were done. They were normally done with traps, or the way that you can actually see there's a film of it in the Elephant Boy in a Kedah, building a huge enclosure, getting tame elephants, kunkeys to drive the wild elephants into the enclosure. Very traumatic for the animals, of course. But no way of capture is easy. And elephants don't breed in captivity. There's only animals breeding in zoos now, usually because of artificial insemination. It's very rare for elephants to breed in captivity. In traditional thought, it's very coy and they like to mate in private, but I think it's actually more complex reasons about zoo trauma to do with it. And this idea that elephants represent power, I think, is very clear. And they're associated with this war animal. But it's quite odd because in Buddhism, the elephant is at the beginning of the real appearance of mythology of the elephant we know about. The elephant is very much a maternal creature, a very gentle creature. The Buddha himself is an elephant. His mother dreams of elephants before he's born to show he'll be a regal leader. And I think this is part of it. You're not going to have a bullfight with an elephant because an elephant, Akbar said, is worth 100 horses. They're very, very expensive animals to capture, to keep, to look after. So, they're precious. But I think people, there are attacks on elephants. African people eat elephants in some communities. Maasai prove their prowess by spearing elephants. There are instances, and in Africa the elephant is a much more hostile creature than the Indian elephant. But I think in India they're seen as being gentle, despite the fact they're also executioners and war animals. So they have this amazing complexity of meanings. And the difference between the male elephant and the female elephant is huge. All the captive elephants in Kerala are tuskers, and in India only the male elephant grows proper tusks. So the female elephant is not seen as so important. Also, female elephants keep their calves with them for such a long time that that's quite a nuisance because you're going to have to do everything with a calf in tow. And the calves are quite fragile as well, so that's rather difficult. I'm not sure I've answered your question.
No, but I think you have in part. But I was just wondering it's quite curious that though they are angry animals in the wild and dangerous, that somehow never sticks about them. You still think of them as caring, beautiful, loving things and gentle creatures.
Because they're tamed. The way you tame an elephant is you just beat the hell out of it. You break its will. That's how you tame an elephant. It's appalling. Go online and look at Ringling circus elephants. Baby elephants are tied up and beaten. And that's the only way you can do it. There is no nice way to tame an elephant unless it's tamed from birth and thinks of itself more as a human. It's incredibly brutal. And they're also social animals. These are animals that live in groups for the female elephants for all their life, male elephants because obviously for breeding you don't want the inbreeding, so the male elephant's kicked out about the age when he's about 10, and they often form bachelor herds or they become single, roaming around. But the other elephants stay together, and to trap elephants, you're breaking up these social networks and knowledges of migratory routes, of what's safe to eat, what's not safe to eat, how to bring up calves. So, if you kill one animal, you're killing a whole herd usually.
Pallavi.
Actually, I was wondering, thank you for your proposal, but I was wondering if you could talk a bit more as well about the kinds of films that do depict elephants. And is it, when you choose to have an elephant in your film, is it a way of sort of signifying that this is going to be completely cut off from reality, and this is not the kind of game that we're talking about? It's something that's really not about everyday life. It's another kind of picture that we're choosing to make. I mean, is that one reason to have? Is that a possible reason to have?
I mean, I think until perhaps the 19th century, if you lived in North India, elephants were very much around you. I mean, in Mughal times, forests were really full of elephants. And quite dangerous for that reason, because elephants are very good at hiding. You wouldn't believe something so big can hide itself. And if you surprise an elephant, that's pretty fatal. But I think it was this idea that most people in India that I ask have got an elephant story. They've met an elephant, they've seen an elephant, they've had some contact with an elephant in some way. And it's also amazing when people see elephants. It has an effect on people, however cynical or hard-boiled, if you see it. They are so big. I think you forget those were not full-grown elephants in Hati Merisandi. A big elephant is just colossal. I don't know if you've been following the Dasera procession, which is about to start in Mysore. Now they no longer have stables in Mysore. They're out in the forests in Dwyer and places, and they're bringing them in. And, one elephant's put on 400 kilos, hooray, one's lost 700 kilos. These are huge creatures. And they do have this very peculiar demeanour, they're very clear. And so for a lot of people, I think elephants have become this, villagers are an object of fear and trouble and danger. But even those people believe at night something happens to elephants. They become in some way transformed by the night. So I think certainly some sort of feeling that elephants are of a different world, but of our world, is very much there, that they're intermediary. In films, certainly power. If you want to show anybody wealthy, they have an elephant. And, I've met many people who said, my grandfather was the last person in our family who could afford to keep an elephant. And, even in Udaipur now, where they have a procession, they have to hire in the elephants. They no longer have their own stables. And, the fuss about them. So they have this military power behind them, I think, very much. And, the British, I don't know if anybody hasn't trained Tumai of the elephants, which I think, you're missing something. Tumai, the elephant in here, goes to Africa with the British Army to be a beast of burden. And, because they have to drag the heavy artillery, you have to use elephants. So they're right up to there were elephants. I've seen pictures of elephants in Britain dragging artillery in the First World War. Zoo elephants were taken out. So power, authority, and then, of course, this spiritual element. So although I gather elephants were not in Kerala temples before the 19th century, that, if you want your temple to be anything, you have an elephant. And if you can't afford an elephant, you hire an elephant. And if you hire Padmanabhan, he's over 2 lakhs a day. So again, it's this symbol of wealth and importance. I think this problem about elephants being seen as childish, it's a bit like when you say I like elephants, it's a bit like saying, I suck my thumb, or I can't sleep without the light on at night. It's seen as being childish in some way, and this way that animals have become in the West, sentimental, middle-aged lady, kids with a cap, what that, pit bulls representing, and the elephant, the animal, we seem to have a problem of finding a space for animals, now we no longer use them. And this thing about, 3 generations ago, in this country, you would have grown up with contact with animals, whether it was a horse of your own or the milkman's horse, or, you would have known animals, you would have probably had them living in your house, you would have lived on a farm, and, to kids now who don't know where milk comes from. So, again, these sort of whole animal things, I think, are quite complicated. In films, never work with animals and children. It's very expensive. I mean, Corder with the elephant boy came back to shoot in London, needed more footage. A poor old Savile had to go out in his loincloth and turban in London, and they got the elephants from the zoo for the film. And they had to get Kew Gardens to cut all its bamboo to feed the elephants, so they could reenact these scenes in the studio. So working with elephants, a male elephant drinks 200 litres of water a day. Where are you going to do that? Films like Water for Elephants or something. It's unusual now to make a film with an animal in it. Also now you've got to have all the veterinary approvals, all the SPCA or RSPCAs and so on. And I think so animating is quite a clever idea as well. But films with animals, I don't know. Maybe. I hope they'll film the elephant's journey.
Yeah, thank you for this interesting beginning for research. I just wonder, you mentioned again about the sort of large narrative of India being orientalized to being, and I think of late there's been a resurgence, in fact, this whole idea of India being a slowing economy, there's this whole idea of elephant cannot dance, or whether it can dance, or whether India is a tiger, or is it an elephant. All these parallels are always drawn. My own interest is in communication of states project and images abroad. And I think there is this resurgence of the use of the image of elephant to represent India. I have two related sort of points to it. One is whether you could talk a little more about how that image in fact emerged in the Western discourse. Was it a calculated image that sort of showing India as sort of passive, slow, rumbling, confused, sort of territory, whatever, and maybe some sort of something to do with the shape of the country. I don't know how that emerged. Secondly, is something that I am happening with, I'm just starting my PhD. I want you to talk a little more about when you come into creating another set of discourse work related to Indian context, because I find it's very interesting that you have taken only the Indian elephant and the African elephant is a different. I don't know about biologically how separate we must see them. But you're creating this new discourse, let's say, and have you thought through the position you would be handling? Because you're clearly coming from an advocacy point of view as well, and constantly referring to elephant as something we need to protect, and creating a politics around it. Let's say, I've always been fascinated by the division between buffalo and cow in India. Cows have always been honored, and buffaloes have always been ignored, and I think there's politics involved.
And eaten.
So how do you aim to approach this, and you yourselves are this discourse coming from London again, and it's very interesting. How do you sort of see your politics play out in the future? Where do you think this is leading?
Rachel, can I just sort of add to that? When I was saying about masculinity, there is something about corpulence and power in India, so that when, say, in the right-wing movement, Ram's iconography becomes much more muscular as opposed to becoming lean and mean. So there is something around power and corpulence that probably relates also to what Asim has just asked us.
Well, there's lots of things there. Let's begin with the African and the Indian elephant. They're different species. One is Elephas, the Indian one, the African one's called Loxodonta. They split so long, I mean, way beyond human beginnings. To that point, I don't really understand. I can't think conceptually. They're very, very, very different species. And there are many other kinds of elephants which have become extinct, like we think Hannibal's elephants were some kind of North African elephant. Elephants need a lot of water. They can't live in deserts, obviously. So that's very different. There's also, I don't know if you remember in Goodness Gracious Me, the guy used to go around saying everything was Indian. And the Shakespeare, Indian, royal family, Indian, Prince Charles, he says, African, because African elephants have much bigger ears than Indian elephants, and it's very striking that the ear of the African elephant is the shape of Africa, and the ear of the Indian elephant is the shape of India. But I think that just happens. It's just one of those things you were taught when you were kids, how to recognise the elephants as being different. I mean, they're very different in all sorts of ways, the shape of the back, the number of toes they've got, all sorts of differences between them, although there are some similarities. The elephant, now, I was interested in the words people have used. Elephants are not corpulent in the sense of being fat. They don't have a great deal of body fat. They're so big because they have very poor digestive systems. And so it's, I mean, there's a wonderful, you can see an autopsy of an elephant, and it's cut open, and there isn't much fat under the skin. The skin itself is thick in places, but there's not fat underneath it. The elephant is so big to allow it to accommodate its digestive tract. It has a trunk because its brain is so heavy it can't bend down like a horse can to eat, so it needs this trunk, and there's this whole sort of, again in prehistory, a whole load of proboscids, these animals with trunks. The elephant is not slow. The elephant can run at about 35 kilometres an hour. So again, it's got a lot of attributes. It's not a passive animal. It's an animal which makes spaces, makes decisions, chooses its life, where it migrates and how it goes. And this idea of the Sanskrit Gajagamani being this elegant creature, whereas, here if you said a woman's an elephant, you get a good slap. I mean, people wouldn't appreciate that in any way. Or I don't know how many of you read Sanskrit, but in Shakuntala, when we first meet King Dushyanta, we're told he's a Girichara Gaja, which is a particular kind of elephant. It's a sturdy, hard elephant. So, there's all these different kinds of elephants. There are even castes, there are jatis of elephants. So they're seen as having these different values. So I don't think, I would say that the elephant is often seen as a symbol of strength and power, and its use in heraldry, say, or its use to represent India is partly that. I haven't studied it in great detail, but Europeans have been fascinated with the elephant. From Hannibal's elephants, Alexander meeting King Porus and his elephants. The first elephants, Henry II had a pet elephant in the Tower of London. This elephant in Saramago's story given to Emperor Maximilian that crossed Europe and how he transformed people's lives as he walked across. I think it's an admiration, but it's also this, what on earth is this animal? What is it? And I think in a way, the camel now symbolises to some extent West Asia or the Middle East, so the elephant symbolises India in many ways, has come to do this as a wise creature, a creature of forbearance and so on. But obviously, it's like the British animal. What's the British animal? It's a lion. We don't have lions. It doesn't always make sense. It's to do with attributes that humans give animals that make them, Welsh don't have dragons, I believe, but, they are things which give them some kind of symbolism like that. Now, elephants in India, Mayavati's elephants, very important. Do you think Dalits ever had access to elephants before? Well, they do. Mahouts are Muslims and Dalits and tribals. So as controllers of elephants, but not as people who own elephants. Elephants are owned by priests and kings. So there's this sort of tension there, and Mayavati is showing her symbolic power by elephants. And, this act of subversion, but thank God they're stone elephants. But she's doing that this way. Now, my position, yes, of course, there are people who have a number of stands on animals which I think have come out in, from the animal rights movement, really was where it started, to a whole sort of spectrum of how people see animals and where they stand. And you can't be apolitical about that, I don't believe. But, I'm not going to be an elephant activist in India by any means. And, being an elephant activist in London isn't really got much point to it, because there are no elephants in London anymore. The last elephants now live in Whipsnade. And though one could say you don't want any more captive elephants, I don't think there's any chance of any more captive elephants coming through. Even in India, I mean, Nehru and Mrs. Gandhi used to give elephants as part of policy. I mean, many countries you go into in the world, you have elephant given by Nehru in a symbol of friendship and so on. That's not going to happen anymore. I mean, in India, you know, people can manage their politics perfectly well without having me butting in on it. But what I'm interested in doing, I am interested in things that do impact here. I mean, like ivory would be something I feel quite strongly about. You know, people seem to think you can go up to an elephant and unscrew its tusks. You know, that's not what happens at all. Elephants are killed. I mean, you know, by ivory market, you know, the recent biggest arrest was in New York. I mean, that's international. I think that's important. But I think an understanding, for me, it's about understanding a culture. So that would be my politics rather than an activism within that I would be wanting to look at. And I think within India, you know, people have to make this. So you have a temple elephant like Guruvaya Kesavan. When the task force, or the Tusk Force as we all call it, gave its report, it was burnt publicly by the Elephant Owners Association in Kerala because it advocates you can't have temple elephants. Many of you have been to Pondicherry and met Lakshmi, the elephant at the temple there. Maneka Gandhi's had her taken away because she had foot disease. You know, elephants get sick if they're made to stand for hours. How do you then cope with that? Do we say no captive elephants, no elephants in zoos, no elephants for ritual? Then people say, well, we can't have our rituals without elephants. Now, those are debates which I can follow, but I'm not going to try and intervene. You know, that's not my role, or to campaign for forestry. But you can raise awareness. A lot of the campaigns for building elephant bridges over roads and railways where so many elephants die every year are fundraising in the West. You must have seen a couple of years ago the elephant statues all over the country. Today there's an elephant outside in the city of London, one of those fiberglass elephants, you know, saying for the Deutsche Bank to be Charity of the Year. I don't know if it won or not. Elephant family. You know, so you can be involved to that extent, but you can't really intervene. I mean, you know, you cannot be a foreigner in London and intervene in Indian politics like that, but you can campaign against ivories. But most of the ivory isn't from India in any case. Or elephants in zoos.
I really enjoyed that, and this question may be something which you addressed at the start, and I came a little bit late. But this is just to follow up on this. I was very struck by what you said about the elephant as an Indian symbol and as a window into understanding Indian culture. I mean, I was wondering if the depiction of the elephant in cinema had changed over time in either its frequency or the form in which we encounter it in cinema, and what that would then tell us, if you like, about the changes in Indian culture over time, in the distribution of wealth and power, which is what you see symbolized. So, in terms of the changes over time in its sort of cinematic depictions, it's a request for more information.
I think in the early films we definitely see the elephant as a symbol of power. You know, the elephant, I mean, anything where you have historical films, if you're going to have the elephant as a symbol of power, so Mughals, ancient India, there the elephant would be a symbol of power. I mean, it's hard to say they haven't, I mean, the elephant has been sort of in and out of cinema. Religious elephants we see certainly in films, but I think now the fact that the elephant seems to have, I mean, this association of Ganesh and the elephant, which is certainly there. I mean, obviously Ganesh has an elephant head, but he's not an elephant. And he's always talked about as the elephant god, which he isn't. I mean, Ganesh's role in, I mean, I've not been quite clear in my mind about his actual involvement with elephants, because his myths of origin are all to do with the beheading of an elephant. And we have in Hindu mythology, we also have Gajasura, the demon elephant. You know, with bloody skin. So I'm not entirely, that's one thing where I'm not sure. Ganesh's moved now to becoming this cutesy character. And also very interesting artistically, because Ganesh has become the most abstract in art terms of the gods. You know, you can have, you know, we all know those little symbols that look like Ganesh. I think that's something fascinating with him there. And one of the things I want to look at, which I'm hoping to do over the next year or so, is the growth of the Siddhivinayak temple in Bombay as a symbol of power. Because when I first started going there in the early 90s, that was a very small temple, and now it's huge. It's one which, you know, people like Amitabh Bachchan walk to barefoot, family walks there barefoot at night. It's a massive structure. It's got the most defence because they think it's one that's, you know, a likely terrorist attack. You know, these shifts in the meanings there would be, I think, things that I would want to bring together rather than being actually able to trace these historically. Now, Hati Marasati, I've said it spawned these copycats, but they never really made it. Fewer films now would be about forestry. You don't have. I mean, the forestry department still looks after animals, but they've become a tourist attraction now rather than anything else. And you know, that would be something where I'm.
I was thinking. The state has tried to project itself as the famous Asian Games. Apu is the symbol of India. That was one clear self sort of portrayal of the state to show itself as friendly. I think Apu was around growing up years was the iconic image of the state in some ways trying to project itself.
I think it does, but you know, it has different meanings of elephant. You know, there's oh gosh, where did I read it? The one book where Mrs. Gandhi wrote the foreword about the elephant being our great symbol of you know, all the good qualities that children should try to emulate. And I mean, I think very much this kind of instructive. There's always a feeling with elephants because they're wrinkly that they're very old. You know, when you're a kid, you always think they're old, and that, you know, you should try and be constant and brave and steadfast like the elephant. And there's also, of course, a famous myth in India, you know, about the blind men and the elephant, and they can't see the hole till they see it. And I think that's often a way people have felt about things in India. You know, they feel that the tail is a rope and the trunk is something and the leg is a column, and you know, that in a way it doesn't seem to go together, and that sort of mystery. But I mean, I don't think it's orientalised. I mean, there's the funny bit in Passage to India when Adele and Mrs. Quested go on their trip, and Mrs. Moore, sorry, not Mrs. Quested, Adele Quested and Mrs. Moore says, "Oh no, it's bound to end in an elephant ride. It always does." You know, in that way that people think that's what people actually want to do. You know. And that promotion of the elephant, but it's not just, if you look in India, elephant, Fevicol, glue, in advertising elephants are everywhere. You know, once you mention elephants to people, then they start appearing everywhere, and how they have become this symbol of something you can rely on in this sort of changing world. Banks use elephants as symbols, and I never stop, it's like when you're a kid learning to spell banana. ICICI Bank uses the elephant as a symbol, doesn't it? And, you know, I'd like to look at the advertising around elephants as well, and the idea of constancy. Pardon me? Who did?
Grindlays, yes.
Bank, of course, was the elephant, yeah. And this idea of things that are safe and reliable.
That's one question.
You saying how basically the elephant defines the representation of India as well as of the time as well as Indian culture. Wouldn't you kind of bring regionalism into that and say that, for example, Bengal as well as the Bengal tiger is the defining animal of that area? So isn't that kind of notion that elephant is a symbol of India as a country?
I mean, that's certainly true. I mean, now today the elephant is confined to certain parts of India. I mean, very small areas now where you find elephants. You know, where there's still forests. Obviously, the Kerala, Karnataka, Chhattisgarh, you know, the border of the foothills of the Himalayas and so on. And there are definitely different regional animals, but I suppose it's always that idea of choosing, you know, one that symbolises, and of course the royal symbolism of the elephant is hugely important for India being this majestic civilization and also sacred, I think. I mean, one of the things that I'm apart from the army context, is the Islamic history of the elephant. Of course, there's a famous elephant surah in the Quran, but there aren't really, there doesn't seem to be, again, that association of the elephant. I mean, it seems to be a very Hindu thing. I don't know if any of you know, but a few years ago the elephant died in Karachi Zoo, and they wanted to stuff the elephant but didn't have the money, so kept the skin in the museum, and every day flowers appear and nobody knows who's doing it. But you know, this sort of feeling that people have about them, and this combination of the royal, the powerful, and the mystical, bringing together these attributes that, you know, elephants do have this kind of human quality. I mean, animals that feel completely alien to us and animals that feel similar to us, and yet an animal, you know, although it's a mammal, I think that's about as far, I'm not very good at biology, but I think that's about as far back as we go in similarities. You know, they're very different species from us, and yet in many ways it's one that we feel closer to. I mean, the tiger, of course, you know, I mean, that's hugely contested at the moment, and it's banning of tourists from tiger reserves. Is it good, is it bad, and poaching and so on, with the tiger and the rhino in Kaziranga and so on. You know, it is different. I mean, in Gujarat, of course, the lion. But then the lion of the Punjab, though I've never seen a Punjabi lion. Lions of the Punjab.
And several dabas, basically, called Shere Punjab.
I don't know if this concerns it comes within the scope of your study, but I was wondering if the ubiquitous presence of the elephant in Indian popular culture has affected the conservation efforts for this animal, and has it been better relative to other animals, say for instance the tiger, the rhinoceros?
It's certainly in Asia, the countries where the elephant is sacred and royal, so India and Thailand mostly, the elephant has done much better than countries like Cambodia and Vietnam, where it has a status, but also countries which have seen terrible political unrest and, you know, deforestation. I mean, Agent Orange is probably what's killed off a lot of the Vietnamese elephants, of course. And, you know, if you go to Vietnam now, you still see those scorched forests. But relative to, I mean, the tiger is seen very much in Indian culture. You know, there's even Sanskrit metres called the Shardula Vikridita, metres named after tigers. You know, the idea of you know, you see it as a symbol. She who rides the tiger, of course, the goddess and the tiger. I mean, the tiger has, I think, also a hugely symbolic role. But tigers aren't tamed, you know, even if, which is it Mr. Natwala where Amitabh has the tiger? You know, they're not really tamed in the same way. And they don't seem to have, I mean, there are tiger deities. Remember the Bengali film with the guy who dresses as the tiger? Is it Buddhadev? The tiger
Bahadur.
Yeah, in Bahadur.
Yeah.
You know, that there you have, I mean, you do have a lot of tiger imagery, and I think that helps with the tiger. But the real problem is human. I mean, this is it when you have about animal rights. You know, I mean, do animals have rights? I mean, I think it's a big question, which I'm not going to even remotely answer here. But when we have, I mean, humans need food. So humans start clearing forests and always have done. But on the other hand, where do the animals go? And tigers are affected just as much by the clearing of forests as elephants. I would have thought, yes, I mean, it's a lot easier to raise campaigns for an animal that's symbolic, that's cute, than it would be for, you know, an ugly animal or so on. I mean, you know, you could take perhaps the example of the Ganges crocodile. You know, that's not an animal that's done well, and I don't know whether, you know, although you see Ganga and Yamuna with their vehicles, you don't have much symbolism of these animals. But I think with the elephant it certainly helps, because, it's a very big, expensive, famously, it's like a white elephant. How do you make your opponent go bust? You give him a white elephant. You can't afford to keep it. So, but people have to decide at some point in a country where there are a lot of very poor people what the priorities are for animals and what the priorities are for people.
I have a question.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit more. Like in your discourse, I came to what is the differences between the white elephant and the normal black elephant? I don't know if that has come, but in our community, say the white elephant has more divinity than the normal. Like it's no more there, but even in the folk tales and everyday life, we still say the white elephant is attached with more divinity than the normal one.
Which community is that?
That's a Boro community in Tripura.
Ah, right. Well, very interesting.
And in fact, Tripura, the Maharaja of Tripura was paying taxes to the Mughals in terms of elephants.
Yeah. That was very important with that collecting of elephants. And of course, Tripura, to any Hindi film fan, the Burman family, of course, S.D. and R.D. Burman being from that royal family. The white elephant is still was the Siamese flag with the white elephant. And in India, you don't hear so much about white elephants. I mentioned that Tapan Singha film, the Safed Hati, earlier. Then white elephants are not quite albino. They have some pigmentation difference, but I'm not quite sure what it is. But they're very rare. But in Thailand, any white elephant belongs automatically to the royal family. And so they're captured, and it's important that they're seen owning them. In India, Indra's elephant, Airavat, is a white elephant. And of course, Airavat's very important in Thai culture. But I don't know many stories of white elephants in Indian culture, and I'd be very interested if anybody comes up with any. That's the thing about elephants, is people have these stories and different events around them about how elephants, behave differently or treated in different parts. That would be very interesting, knowing how elephants were seen differently in different parts of India. Kerala is obviously very rich in elephant tales and elephant lore, but I'm sure, Mahuts have songs and community beliefs and customs and so on, that would be something else. And are those different, the Mahuts in Western India from the Mahuts in the East? I'm sure in Tripura and Assam there's a different culture up there. That I have only some experience from reading Drustila Chaudhary. What's his name? Lahiri Chaudhary. Drustila
Lahiri Chaudhary.
You have to keep going shooting elephants, so I found it quite... I had to read it but didn't enjoy it. But this whole sort of regional difference as well between the elephants, I think, is fascinating. And nowadays, when you have on these websites in Kerala, he's a Nadan elephant, meaning he's a Kerala one. He's a Bihari. And they're quite upfront about talking about the different kinds of elephants and where they're from. And, but are they actually physically different? Whereas within the elephants, the categories in the Gaja Shastra are of different types. Of the skinny, tall elephant and the short, fat elephant, and then the perfect elephant.
There are no further questions. We can thank Rachel for a very fascinating paper.
I'm sorry I couldn't come on
and look forward to more work coming out of this research. Thanks.